every day and every night. Should you go or should you fight? It's okay, just take my hand through it all. You will stay.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. This is Gail of Gaia and Free Range, and I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Paul, and our very special guest star. She's known as NOLAbutterfly or Raphaelle O'Neil. So let me bring both on. So hang on one second here. Hi, Raphaelle. How are you?
Hello, Gail. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And let me see if did Paul want to come in? Maybe he didn't want to come in. There he is. Okay. Anyway, he may stay in the background. So anyway, I'm very excited to talk to you because it's a very timely topic, shall we say. Yes. And I would like to be able to keep the show on the uncensored platform. So we'll have to speak, shall we say, carefully.
And thanks for the reminder.
I hate to do it. I really do. I don't like it, but
Well, I lost my YouTube channel just recently, and I'm building it back up. So I have an appreciation for years of hard work going bye-bye overnight. So exactly. Yeah, we definitely don't want that.
So what I've done is, if you want to, we can go after a certain portion of time to a uncensored channel, but what happens is you lose a lot of viewers that way. And if we can figure out ways to say things that we know won't trigger the algorithms, then we can speak and still get the information out there without them taking us down. Because I'm
sorry. Actually, I'm thinking they're starting to flag the word alga. So if you use that word, then it raises red flags and they look at the video more closely.
Oh, lovely.
So even the alg is looking for the word alg. So
we're not going to offend any algae here. We're going to talk about the weather, and what is more innocent than talking about the weather, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So I suppose many in my listening audience or our listening audience may not know who you are and what your background is. So you're an author. You've done a lot of things. You're very much an activist as well. And I'm honored to have you on the show and to tell people what you've done, because your courage gives other people the same. When one stands up, all of a sudden, it's just like when you're in an audience and they give a standing ovation, it always starts with a couple people, then all of a sudden everybody starts standing. It's one of those things. But anyway, go ahead and tell us about it.
I'd like to, it's kind of, I'm really, who am I? I started out being just a concerned citizen, an accidental activist turned guerrilla journalist, because I couldn't believe the things that I was finding out, and I wanted to find out more. And all I was doing was asking questions about what it was that I was seeing happening in front of me in my skies. And the resistance I met when I labeled what I was taught quickly to call them chemtrails. I was made aware of the phenomena through the What in the World Are They Spraying documentary a few years ago, Michael Murphy and Dane Wigington put out. And it definitely woke up a lot of people. But coincidentally, that day, after viewing the movie, I looked up at the sky, and I happened to see my blue sky day, one contrail at a time, disappear behind this jet exhaust that fanned out and eventually took out the entire sky. And had I not just watched the movie, I would not have noticed. I would have looked up, saw it was a blue day, then later on I would have seen it was a gray day, but I would not have noticed that the grayness came out of jet exhaust. And so I had just gotten language that this was chemtrails and to call them chemtrails. But as soon as I pointed to the sky to my friends and said, look at the chemtrails, they were said, oh, I heard about that. That's a conspiracy theory. So they didn't look.
Yes.
Now, if I would have said, hey, look at the contrail pollution, take out the sky and create jet cirrus and cause albedo modification, that would have been language that would have forced any scientist to acknowledge the accuracy of my statements, and it would not have been dismissed. And herein lies this long journey I went in trying to wake up my friends, like a lot of come by it accidentally and honestly activists try to do. First, we try to wake up our friends and family and say, hey, look, if we pay attention to the, if you notice this, we share this with our friends, we can maybe stop this. Like, what is this? And the linguistic game behind the chemtrail, contrail, is it a chemtrail? Is it a contrail narrative? Fascinated me. And I was seeing, I was learning about the history of weather modification and the patents, and surely the fact that there are skies are being taken out by planes is a documentable thing. But they were saying it was inadvertent, it was accidental, it was a consequence of and it's just contrails, so it doesn't really matter. But um, but then at the same time, we're watching all these signatures of artificial weather manifesting in our skies. Our gut intuition is telling us this is not how it was when we were a kid. This is not okay. Meanwhile, you've got Al Gore over here talking about something CO2. And I was on the Al Gore train right off the bat. I mean, I saw what
I was at
inconvenient
first too. I was teaching in an environmental science class at the time, and I got to tell you, this is a quick little short tidbit. And anyway, I showed the video, Inconvenient Truth, isn't it? Something like that, or Inconvenient, and it can. Yeah. Anyway, I showed it. Yeah. It was in the class, and afterwards, a student came up to me, and I hadn't even considered this. And so I had a very wise student there. He had something to teach me, and said that, they're just doing that for carbon tax purposes.
Tax purposes.
Yeah.
And beyond that, we have even
money.
That's the financial aspect. Never take a cow to market if you're not going to cash in on her 6 ways.
Exactly. But anyway,
it's also an agenda, an element in an agenda narrative, a narrative that justifies consolidation of power. And this is what it's turning into. So, big problems in the world that we as individuals are not equipped to handle without some great global governing agency to oversee it all. I mean, that's the narrative as it is. And so this is what I was seeing. And at the same time, I also I was dating a survivor of satanic ritual abuse. So that educated me in different ways. It probably didn't help my activism because it shoved me too far down the rabbit hole. But I when I saw NASA creating a new cloud chart to share with kids, and this was before I had my first child, I said, oh no, this is horrible. How are parents, and I knew some parents that don't lie to their children, that don't try to educate their children in lies. And I said, this is, if NASA is creating new clouds, that finally after like millennia, we have new cloud types that don't look like anything in any of the classic portraits of clouds.
You mean the stripes in the sky, or
the streaks, the frequency? And then we hear about HAARP, which is atmospheric heater in Alaska through the University of Alaska that the Air Force has admitted. And we have a 5-minute video. I don't know if we have time to show that, but that where they say that they don't need that to manage the ionosphere anymore, because and the ionosphere is a region of the Earth above the troposphere, above where the planes fly. And so what this does is it heats up a region of the Earth's ionosphere. And when it does that heating up can suction the jet stream and move it around based on where this heating up of the region is through arrays. They have arrays that can mirror this and this directed injected energy to specific places on the Earth. And there's about 6 or more HAARP facilities at least on the Earth that we know of. So I knew about those things, didn't know when they were going off or what. I could see obvious signatures of some electromagnetic interference that's not natural, that was not natural growing up, the ripples and the clouds and whatnot. And I wanted to write this book as a act of love to parents, to support them. I knew it was going to be controversial, so there's no such thing as bad press. If you should get into the attention of human consciousness, that's a good thing. And sure enough, when I released that book, Funny Clouds, a Chemtrail Tale, I wrote a children's chemtrail book. I had 7 bad reviews before I sold my first book, because as an activist, I was being watched. So I didn't start out an activist, but I became one out of sheer curiosity, and sheer I became obsessed. And I was studying the narrative as it was presented to chemtrail activists. I still didn't know enough stuff, but when I wrote that book, I became a target. And it became like a war between the believers and the non-believers on my comment page. I mean, I wish I had as many books sold as I have comments.
A children's
Yes. It became, I should have my children taken away from me. I should, but then other people were thanking me. Thank you for doing this. Somebody needs to tell the truth. And others have reviewed the book, said it was very uplifting. It has an uplifting message, even though it's a heavy subject. And it does say that responsible adults will be, seeing to holding elected officials accountable to this outrage and assault on our skies. But I had to dive further into the science. And I went, and because I was intellectually honest and didn't want to be terrorizing children for nothing, if it was just harmless contrails, which I already knew. I had seen the contrails take out my sky. I had seen it change the weather and the climate that day and other days and days without it happening. What's happened? What happened to all what happened to all the plane traffic, and how can there be such a big discrepancy between the believers and the non-believers? And
yeah, look at what's going on today. I got another one of those huge discrepancies. And yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, because I did a show on a radio show a number of years ago and tried to talk about chemtrails. And of course I was told, well, those are contrails. And I would say, well, if those are contrails, and how does this work? Because when I'm outside in really cold weather, my breath will show, and and it dissipates very quickly.
yes,
but I don't see like a mile long contrail behind me when I'm outside. It's not a contrail. I'm sorry. It's a chemtrail. And then they said, and then I found out that chemtrail is actually, that name, that terminology is in the U.S. Air Force Academy's
the manual. Yeah, it's been used in instruction manuals. And then they'll split hairs and say, well, weather modification is not chemtrails. It's done differently. Well, there's many different ways of doing weather modification. Weather modification is an umbrella that covers a lot of different mediums. And so the chemtrails were, contrail or chemtrail. Well, what's the difference? Because contrails don't form on pixie dust, right? They condense on condensation nuclei. And jet exhaust happens to have a lot of it. Now, if you're not testing the jet exhaust, you're not in a position to debunk me. You're not. And and I'm not in a position to make a claim either. But so I looked at, we tested the conditions. We had a team here and tested the conditions. And we said, well, what causes a contrail to form versus having it persist? And when I challenged my local meteorologist to answer that question, she got it so wrong. She basically said a contrail persists when the air aloft is hotter than the jet exhaust. And I'm like, when does that happen? We would be in trouble. If the air aloft was hotter than the jet exhaust, we would all be fried. So she just backed down and admitted she didn't know as much as I did. And I've got that email, but I didn't humiliate her publicly with that. But and I mean, and when we tested the conditions, because there was an Appelman chart, because the military can't go and do military operations and not know if their plane farts are going to form clouds that are going to give their operations away, right? I mean, the military needs to know what's up, and the military does. And the military had a chart called the Appelman chart. So we started testing, does the weather, at this atmosphere, we can see the humidity and the relative humidity and the temperature at each atmosphere, right? And then we can say, well, given these conditions, there should be no jet exhaust that persists. And then we were challenged. Oh, well, the supersaturated ice regions, supersaturated ice. So it was like, I looked that term up, they said it was at over 90% supersaturated ice. And so, of course, there would be contrails that day that persist. And I said, well, okay, supersaturated. Let me look up the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration's glossary of terminology and see if I could find this.
That's how they hide what they're doing with the terminology. They do that in medicine. They do that in religion. They do that.
I know, but you know what? It wasn't even listed in the glossary of terminology. So I said, well, how can something so pivotal to settling the freaking controversial debate? I mean, all you have to tell me, oh, well, the RH factor was, relative, the relative ice, supersaturated ice levels are high enough to form that. Well, that would seem like a very easy explanation. Why isn't that in the consciousness of man? and so that was a very important question. And then we interviewed an Air Force weather observer, former Air Force weather observer. She said it doesn't make sense that there would be more water vapor up high than there is down on the ground. So and we didn't know what was doing that. Now we have literature showing that contrails dehydrate actually. And we have testimony that has helped us understand that they use it as boundary layers. And this was from an airplane mechanic when there's a hurricane. He was also an outdoorsman, and he saw them laying the tracks where the hurricane didn't go when it made a 45-degree angle to go opposite the chemtrails. But again, the chemtrails, even if we just take the patents at face value and don't say, okay, can't prove the patents are being employed, but it's a medium. It's a channel 4. So at the very best, it's a contrail pollution. And contrail pollution is a big problem that we have overrode just in our attention span because chemtrails are a conspiracy theory. So now we're not even going to deal with contrail pollution, which really industry appreciates. So industry actually likes and loves the chemtrail narrative because that's been debunked. Well, jet cirrus and contrail pollution hasn't been. Albedo modification, which is and this is where chemtrail activists say it's wrong. It's like there was never any persistent contrails before 1997. Well, this is not true. We have documentation in the 40s and 50s, but here's what else we have in the documentation: the stated desire to weaponize that albedo modification and to use that to harness the energy budget of the earth. So we have stated intention of manipulating that. They're aware of the effects of that. And then we have the literature itself does not deny that there are climate circumstances or side effects to contrails. And then contrails themselves, and that there is aluminum and barium in the jet exhaust.
The pollution.
So what exactly is in there on a good day or a bad day? And is there some now? But here's the kicker: supersaturated ice regions. You know what can cause supersaturated ice regions?
I never heard such a thing before.
Yeah, it was very rare in certain really cold areas where there's a lot of condensation nuclei. The jet exhaust could last. Now, well, what was in the jet exhaust to begin with? That's not natural. So we're not dealing with natural phenomena to begin with, right? So there's nothing natural about jet exhaust. We have to remember that and not just brush it aside. A whole industry brushed aside. They love nothing more than that. Do you know that actually, according to the definition of supersaturated ice regions, contrail exhaust can help form supersaturated ice regions? So in theory, all you need to do to make the albedo modification, which has climate effects, to make clouds, which has climate effects, and I'm going to cite NASA here in a minute to validate once and for all to what extent clouds are significant in their importance of understanding clouds document. But all you need to do is send out a fleet of planes, and we have unmarked planes flying around. We've documented that too. And you get them to pre-treat the skies because, you have a front that comes through and the air is free and clean and everybody's happy. Hallelujah. You have about half a day or a day of that before the planes come out. So planes come out and then they can spray, supersaturate the air with the contrail pollution, aka chemtrails. Contrails are chemtrails are contrails. Hello. But not just that. Some have more chemicals than others. We're going to split hairs on what those chemicals are. No one is equipped to have that battle without testing at the source or grabbing from the sky. But then linking which chemical came out of which plane is an impossible task. And so therefore, unless you're testing at the ground level and testing the private planes that are flying around, you really have no liability. And they love this game. So this leads into the part of the narrative where there is liability, where we have proven things. So hold on. So so all you need to do is fly a fleet of planes around before your regular traffic, and then the regular traffic their condensation trails will be amplified because there's a pre-treatment. And I've heard of this from whistleblowers who haven't gone on record, that they will use one plane for one medium and another plane for another medium, and then the two shall meet in the sky and create a third medium. So there's a lot of ways to slice and dice this beast. And I wrote a paper for the Liberty Beacon called Contrails Matter, reframing the contrail narrative. Contrails matter, reframing the chemtrail narrative. I'm sorry, hard to cite all this. But we really have to hold industry liable for contrail pollution. And when we start doing that, then we'll be able to catch the chemtrail violations, weaponized, deliberate aspects. Now, some people can participate in contrail formation without.
Excuse me. Stop a minute. Hang on one minute. There, did that clear it up?
Hello, can we talk? Yeah.
No, we can. I'm sorry. I had to shut off the audio for the picture that was being shared that was rather relevant.
Right.
Have you seen that? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
We'll just leave it up there. They can read it and while you're talking. So continue.
Sure.
And I'm sorry for the interruption.
Oh,
Some of these things are a little new to me, so I'm still learning. So bear with me.
Oh, yes. Well, that's very, there's a lot of history to weather modification, and it's criminal that the general public is not well versed in the language, so that the person who comes up with stuff sounds crazy, or they're relegated to the conspiracy channel about it, and they're using hot words like chemtrails to describe the scientific phenomena. But the bottom line here is, and I was hesitant to touch the CO2 issue when I came into this. I'm like, if you believe that CO2 is a problem, then you should care about chemtrails. If you don't believe CO2 is a problem, then chemtrails might explain why the narrative is why climate change is starting to, we need to look at the climate changing technologies we have if we're going to talk about climate change. It's only, it's only common sense, right? You have to look at everything. No, some things were on the table, other things were not. You're a crazy conspiracy theorist, and it started. So some people didn't become conspiracy theorists till they started warning their family members recently about certain experimental stuff that was coming their way. But yours truly, and I'm in good company here, has been one for a while, just asking questions and trying to hold industry accountable to the real narrative, the real sustainability narrative, not the false sustainability narrative. And you might have one of those slides in that I gave, the importance of understanding clouds. And it's NASA, and it says, even small, this is very important, so I might repeat it. Even small changes in the location or abundance of clouds can change the climate more than the anticipated changes brought about by greenhouse gases, human-produced aerosols, or other factors associated with global change. NASA. Now, this is important. Even small changes. What are contrails that take out the sky? Small changes in the location or abundance of clouds. We had a blue sky day. Now we have an overcast day, right? Can change the climate. The climate is not the weather. Weather is local. Climate is global, more widespread region versus localized. More than the anticipated changes brought about by other greenhouse gases, because cloud is water vapor condensed, granted, but it is a greenhouse gas, and the formation of clouds happen really, and the breakdown of clouds can happen very quickly. Now, what affects, well, so NASA is saying that the driving force is clouds and small change in the location or abundance of it, and we're ignoring it. Now, I didn't realize this. I didn't, like I said, I didn't want to touch the CO2 narrative because I was trying to bridge the gap between the two sides, right and left. I find that the truth is 100%, and that those who practice conspiracy take 10% of essential truth away from public view, and then they let everybody fight over the 90% that's there. But if we had that 10% that was missing, we would be united against the conspirator. So in climate change, they say CO2 is causing climate change. Well, that's bogus. We need CO2. We're living beings. Oh, but it is the largest contributor of greenhouse gases. How can
They're
they get
such
away with
liars.
saying that when that's a lie?
They lie
That is
about
a lie.
everything, and they blame everything on humanity when they themselves are the ones that are responsible.
And that they kill people who make cars that run on water, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's not it's not humanity doesn't have the answer. The good news is once we expose all this, we'll have technology available to us to fix this. And there's also, I mean, truly, if a knife can kill and it can
Yeah,
perform surgery.
and there's all kinds of talk nowadays about, what's really in these trails now,
Yes, and so it's a medium for climate. It's a medium. It's a vector for disease, which we won't get too much into. But we've had people that came down with a certain disease, and they were bugged out in the woods, and other people, their neighbors, did too, even though they hadn't seen each other. And it was after the low-flying planes came out with the trails, and this happened in 2 different states. We have testimonies of that, so we know that that disease, it's a disease vector. It can be, it's not always, but it can be. It's a medium again. So, and it's a medium for a narrative ultimately that is in the globalist depopulation toolbox, toolbox of control.
Yeah, that's a toolbox.
So the CO2 thing was very important. How do they get away with omitting the fact that water vapor is the greenhouse gases? 90% of the greenhouse gases that affect climate, 90% is water vapor. Not even 10% is CO2, anthropogenic CO2. You have CO2, then anthropogenic CO2 is a smaller slice of the pie. Then you have methane and the other gases. But because it's anthropogenic is the key. So they say, well, we don't have any way of affecting water vapor, so we're only going to focus on the smaller element that we do affect. Now, I'm not here to be an apologist for industry. Don't you dare misquote me. Don't you dare say that there is no harm being done by industry. What I'm going to say is that blaming CO2 instead of aerosols and pollution, and as you will see, microwaves, which do affect water vapor, is dishonest, scientifically dishonest pseudoscience. And so what I am essentially, who am I to be telling this story? I was a thespian. I was a massage therapist. I'm now a mom. I was just a concerned citizen, but I'm really the kid who's telling you that the emperor wears no clothes. And I'm pointing to his missing drawers. Okay. That's what I'm doing. I'm pointing to his missing drawers because in the research of climate and the chemtrail narrative and weather modification, I became a historian. I had a podcast called Beyond the Veil. That was shared to many platforms. And I saw that there was one person's work who kept repeating over and over again, because it was the work that actually showed me what was going on in my neck of the woods. Because I'm in Louisiana, in New Orleans, actually. I survived Hurricane Katrina. I didn't know about Hurricane Katrina till 3 days before the storm. And in my line of work, in my Beyond the Veil podcast, the good Lord, or whatever kind gracious spirits you want to thank for it, sent me a homeless veteran my way, and who happened to be the Army captain who was ordered to bring as many body bags to New Orleans as he could find 11 days before Katrina made landfall. Thinking there was going to be a terrorist attack, he gathered 5,226 body bags, brought it 115 miles outside of New Orleans, 8 days before Katrina made landfall. Again, I didn't understand this, that there was a hurricane coming, until 3 days before Katrina made landfall. I was stuck in New Orleans, and I had to be flooded see my city flooded, and endure the shock and disbelief of that, and the rebuilding efforts, and those friends lost to suicide, and one of them I found the year after, and everything that comes with the devastation of your city and your town, and everything that you come to accept as the fabric of your civilization. And it's personal to me. And I didn't know 3 days before. I was stuck here. I didn't have a paycheck to get out of town until, I hitched a ride after the storm, when we saw the city was filling up with water after we survived the storm. That's a whole other story. And so, having been on the trail of this, and I had a source in the military tell me, hey, I was just told to repack my bags, to pack my bags in Texas. The storm's going to reform. Harvey's going to reform. I'm on record stating that Harvey's going to reform in the Gulf before the meteorologist did, because the military knows before the meteorologist gets to tell the people if she knows at all, because a lot of them are just reading scripts. So don't be mad at your meteorologists. Most of them are clueless script readers.
Figures. You know what? Maybe we should watch this take a little break and watch this 5-minute video. You want to do that?
I think that would be very useful. Thank you.
Okay, let's go there, and then we can maybe cover more when we get back. Okay.
Rise up, humanity.
Oh, okay.
Is currently running the facility. I've mentioned that it's our understanding through the president of UAF that the plans are to move forward and demolish the facility this summer. So the question to you is that accurate? Can you explain why? And then perhaps to both you and Mr. Schaefer, is there any benefit in exploring a potential relationship with the University of Alaska to perhaps take over the HARP?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. The Air Force has gotten great value out of HARP in the past. We took it over from the Navy and managed it, and actually did a number of experiment campaigns up there, and have finished our work that we're interested in doing up there. We've moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere, which the HARP was really designed to do, was to inject energy into the ionosphere, be able to actually control it. And but that work has been completed.
So that the American government has created weather tampering techniques so that the New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans and to control the rest. Would you explain what you were trying to say?
Well, what I was trying to say is exactly what I said. There is weather control techniques. We have a complete package on that, which I did not bring, but I certainly will see to it that it is brought in for the record. Number one, the entire patents on the equipment. Number two, Senator Claiborne Pell's complete statement and story of his own, that not only does it exist, but that we even utilize it as far back as the Vietnam War. You might want to touch base with Senator Pell.
I just want to repeat before I turn to
questions. Yes, but we do have all that information.
You're saying the government has created weather tampering techniques so that the, quote, New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans.
Worldwide.
Millions of Americans, and to control the rest.
Yes, sir, and that's my belief. As bizarre as that sounds, if somebody had told me that equipment even existed 10 years ago, I would have thought they were nuts, sir. And at this point in time, we have all the documents to prove it. And if you think that 85 tornadoes takes place in the middle of our growing area by simultaneous accident, I'm sorry. With the equipment that's already set up internationally, and as bizarre as that is, it is proven and documented. We will supply you with those documents. As bizarre as that is, I would say that weather wars, and this is quoting actually Senator Claiborne Pell himself, that they are the greatest weapon ever created in the world, and that's the Senator's own statement. So yes, I do stand on that.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, sir. Technology.
Essentially, we're drawing oceanic rain systems that exist over the oceans into geographic targets, into our agricultural areas. The technology uses electromagnetics, so we're not interfering with the atmosphere or with the environment. We're not damaging it. We're not using chemicals fired through rockets like other technologies use. We use a very gentle but powerful technology, launching electromagnetics into the atmosphere to modify the flow of the weather system over the ocean and drawing it into a target. So to try and keep it simple, we establish some kind of link with a weather system, and once we've seen through satellite meteorology that we have that link, we're able to draw that system in incrementally towards the target, such as in this case the Horn of Africa.
So let's take this one as a case study. This was April 20th through the 21st of 2012. This was a visual that they showed on the website, and just as an example of their composite map, and I thought it was a great example to use because here you can actually see you have a front coming through, and then the Doppler radars build a wall. They bloom out, stopping it from continuing on, and it sends it up instead. So it's coming across, but the blooms come, and then it breaks it up and sends it out. And this is...
And it ends rather abruptly like that. But, oh, I can't hear you now.
I'm sorry, I put it on mute for a second in case there was feedback.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was a little bit more. So if you replay that, you will see, and this leads into, so we went a little bit ahead of ourselves here, but this was, did I mute you? I don't. Oh, you're speaking.
Oh, there's Paul. Okay. Let me unmute Paul and he reshare his screen. Let me reshare this and see what. I'm sorry. Please excuse our fumbling here a little bit. Are you doing something? You're okay. Well, apparently
we don't have too much time on this.
Yeah, let's keep going. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's okay. But this is all available on I'm NOLAbutterfly on YouTube and Rumble. It might be easier to find me on Rumble, although I'm putting a lot of my weather stuff back on YouTube. Again, my channel was taken down just a couple months ago with really extensive work, but I've been trying to put up some of my most essential things. And I get myself ready for this next hurricane season because that's when I'm busy documenting this. So it's been very hard, the nail in the coffin of weather modification. Who's doing it and when? The narrative is all wrong. The CO2 narrative is justifying depopulation, because if you saw the Bill Gates video, by now a lot of people who have been on the truth path has seen it, where he says, you know, really, we have a math problem here. See, we have a number we want to get to zero, right? CO2 output. CO2 output is a factor of people times services times carbon per service, you know, TV, heating for the winter, yada, 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 right? And so basically, and then the audience, one of these numbers has to get close to zero. Well, the number can't get close to zero because humans use services, and they're saying the services are good. It's good for people to have television, but one of these numbers have, so we're not going to get rid of television. That's not how we're going to bring it to zero. How are we going to bring it to zero? Well, I love the vajayjay. I'm going to just say the vajayjay is one of the ways I like to bring the population down. I mean, he says this stuff. I'm saying vajayjay just as code here for our uncensored channel. But so really what you have is you have a carbon, these carbon breathers are all a a problem here. This is the narrative is always, it's never a problem with the medicine. It's always the individual who has some problem why they can't tolerate it. Likewise, it's not the pollution, it's the carbon. It's not, well, what about all the aerosols and pollution? And we're just going to ignore that? Oh, that doesn't have any climate effects. Well, yeah, when you turn things into aerosols, you make it really hard for condensation, when really nanotech, the drying out on the ground, like you have ground chemtrails from cars, the catalytic converter and the pesticides. And there's a lot of things that can cause drought on the land as well. But there are things that have overlapped. And with my discovery that I'm about to get into, that the video was leading into, and you see that when that guy was talking about this technology, Acquiesce was the name of the company, where they were going to end the drought in the Horn of Africa by gently aligning with electromagnetics. It doesn't pollute. That was something we got to hear. With electromagnetics, aligning with the jet stream and just gently bringing it in. It's very gentle and sweet and not polluting or invasive. And this is what he's saying. And what I did is I overlapped my work, which is just radar capture, okay, with his words. So after I was told, first of all, by the Army captain that was ordered to bring all the body bags to New Orleans 11 days before Katrina made landfall, I knew that the military knows before I do that there's going to be a storm coming. And then I was warned by somebody in the military that they were told to pack their bags, and I was able to call Harvey out before the meteorologist did. And then I was on high alert because I'm a victim, a survivor, not a victim, a survivor of Katrina. And this was personal to me. And so when Irma was out there, I was on high alert, and I had just interviewed Weather War 101. Weather War 101 was saying that he was very gatekept for his work exposing the power plants that were popping off in synchronicity. And I can confirm this. I drove through weather coming out of power plants in Texas when I was going to the American Meteorological Society conference just a year later, or less than a few months later. But they were apparently synchronizing, and you could see this on radar, these pop-offs, these blooms of water vapor that were adding to the flooding of Harvey. So you had all this rain event that he was saying was coming out of. He says the Doppler was also affecting. He's shown Doppler, but he actually was discouraging me from researching too much on Doppler because he says it's harder to prove. Stick to the power plants. And I have a little problem with when you try to control my thinking, I resist. I tend to go where you don't want me to go. And I say, why can't I go there? But I had
I think for myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes. This is how I didn't get this far, by following orders. So anyway, but I was on to Irma, and there was maybe some rumor that it was going to come to New Orleans by someone on the street who didn't know too much about anything, it turned out. But when Irma, and so I had put it on Facebook, and people were laughing at me, and I'm like, I don't know. I know they're driving these things. I don't know how. And then it went from the East Coast to the West Coast of Florida. And then people were like, oh, did she know something? Does she know something? And then the hurricane's coming in. No, it's not coming to New Orleans. It's going into Florida. But I hear something on the phone of my boyfriend at the time, and it says, the meteorologist is saying, I can't, we don't have a very good signal right now because the storm is interfering with our Doppler radar. And I'm like, huh? Let me see that. And I'm like, and actually this starts my World of Hot Water documentary series that came out of that. And I'm like, oh my God. The eye of the storm is going into the radar, making landfall into it. And the wheels are just squeaking loudly in my head. And I'm like, I don't know where it's going, but I bet you it's going to be piggybacking on Doppler radar. And it did. And it did. And the next storm. And the next storm. And I put it on Facebook, and those that were following said, Katrina. And we looked at Katrina, and it was 5 Doppler radars in a row. Bing, 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 bing. Not like zigzagging in between, like straight directed energy directly into the radar. I'm like, they cannot be
Remember
that
that whole
sloppy.
line of tornadoes not that long ago?
Well, that we hear about tornadoes and you know, I mean, I knew that they were affecting tornadoes, but I couldn't really show you or prove it. Or I mean, there's blooms, but this is direct, and I'm saying I'm throwing this out, and my lawyer didn't want to touch this, but his wife did. I've got a few lawyers' wives I'm friends with, so nobody get in trouble here. But she said, you know, you may not know anything about how they're doing it, but if you can show more than one Doppler radar for one storm and more than one storm in a row, then they're the ones that are in a position of having to explain, because it is a statistical impossibility, right? So I took my question to the American Meteorological Society conference, and I said, what are the odds that there's some sort of inadvertent weather modification? I mean, is it a microwave, right? Microwaves, water vapor. And then we did find something where it says, do not point, because the way Doppler radar, now what is Doppler radar? Okay. You know, when you watch the news at night and the lovely lady or gentleman is telling you Doppler radar says that today the Doppler radar is so good at predicting the weather, at reading the weather, it can almost predict it. Har har har. Yeah, it does predict the weather because it's supposed to send out frequencies to just read the cloud and bounce back, send back the information and read it out, pin it out. But what we're seeing is when the storm is coming, the beam is pointed in one direction for days. And the literature says don't point the beam in one direction for too long. I mean, it's supposed to be nanoseconds, seconds to nanoseconds, because this is microwave technology. It's supposed to be above buildings. This is the troposphere that it's reading, after all. Not the ionosphere, but the troposphere, which is a lower level of the atmosphere than the ionosphere. And so I start looking at the radar and I start deciphering and I start seeing other triangulations. We have this puppy every which way. I proved weather is weaponized and who is weaponizing it when. I've got some patents they might be employing, but I don't know if they're using those patents, but their patents are pretty easy and cheap to employ weather altering techniques to attach to a radar. It's all in there. Whether they're using that or not, it doesn't matter. I have years of showing them, and in certain cases, I'm able to predict the landfall. Not days ahead of time, but ahead of the meteorologist, because I can read what the radar is doing and I know its intentions. And I've triangulated on where it's going. I mean, it's going to be one of the radars. Now, that's the direct approach. They can do the indirect approach. They have just been so lazy in your face. Nobody's got this figured out. I can't believe a meteorologist didn't notice this, but one storm at a time. I mean, we're seeing 45-degree turns over the radar into the next radar, and the beams picking up where the other left off. And in storm relative mean velocity mode, you can see the red and the green polarities, and right in the middle of the polarities, there's a connection to the eye of the storm, and it pulls the hurricane in by the eye. And so we have seen, this is what we have deciphered. It can bloom. When what I was showing at the end of that video is not a hurricane. That was actually the website that catalogs every day for years, radar and water vapor. And we could see a front coming in to a bloom. And by bloom, it becomes the dot that is the radar. They're all across America, first of all, where the reach of one ends, another begins if they don't overlap even. And I mean, it's an EMF problem, if you want to know the truth. I mean, it adds EMF to it's one of the layers of microwave radiation that is poisoning us. And in any case, when it blooms out, like it was in the video, if anybody ever goes and watches the rest of it or whatever, or just replays what we've already shown, as it blooms out, it heats up the region of the troposphere. And so it breaks up the clouds. It stops. There was a front coming in, but there was a wall of see here, try to make it on the screen the right way. A wall of blooms that stopped the the front from coming through, and in the bottom hook, you can see it stretch out. The bloom is round, right? You could see the cloud stretch up around it and go around the Doppler radar like Laffy Taffy on a conveyor belt being pulled apart. And so that's the bloom. They can stop. We have hurricanes that came right up to the city wall and poof, died. Boom. They can stop it. They can feed it.
All
They
right,
can
hang
feed it with a beam. And that beam, that beam will not only take the energy, the storm, the eye of the storm goes right into it, but it amplifies it on the back end. So there's an ionization, which means it strips kind of electrons, and it creates a more unstable element, right? Because if you have an ionized something, there's an ion left on it, and it's like ready to grab hold of something else, right? So ionized stuff is not really very good, generally speaking. I'm sure there's exceptions. I'm not going to be the one who's going to be able to give that lecture today, but this is one of the problems with 5 A B C D E F G H I J. The ionizing of pollution that's in the air, things like that. Biofuels. Biofuels are glyphosate, aerosolized glyphosate, and they have a health effect. So does EMF. The microwaves affect V's and pathogens of all kinds. It makes them bloom. It does. But we're all energy, frequency, and vibration, right? So which frequency does what to what frequency is all a big world of study and science, and the military knows. They've got a lot of studies they've been studying, but regardless of whether you want to say that's crazy, the evidence speaks for itself. So I was already Little Miss Chemtrails, and I was okay. I had adjusted to that position. I was popular before all this. I didn't need to ruin my popularity and, have to start from scratch with friends and family to do this. And so I wasn't really looking forward to then saying, never mind HARP. Look at the thing in our backyard, that Doppler radar. Look at that. Because therein lies a liability. It's not like a plane that's going to scuttle off the side and you're not going to see it again, and you don't know which plane fart came out of which plane, right? It's not like HARP, where I can see my skies are manipulated with some radar, but I don't know where it came from. It is the storm going into the microwave, the technology interlapping with it. And then we had other things. Then there's the opposite one. That's when they decrease, the bloom goes small, and that's when they release the heat, right? So there's what I'm thinking, brainstorming with other people who are more scientifically minded than even I am. I'm a lay person trying to understand the world around her, and I am entitled to it. And they'll tell you, who the hell are you to interject in this conversation? I am someone who is affected by it. I'm a creation of my creator. I have a right to understand.
That's right.
What is taking away my skies? I have a right to ask these questions. I have a right to think for myself, with or without a degree, or to apply my degree in various other ways and other applications. Information is available to everybody else. Who are you to not be questioning this stuff? And so, at this point, at this point, I didn't want to be that girl. I mean, I had better things to do with my time. I'd rather be doing some theater, some and be hanging out with people in a way that doesn't make them go, oh God, there's that girl again.
I had Paul had tried to ask me to do. Paul, are you there? He asked me to share a screen again, but it seemed like it interrupted. Where did he go? There he is. Let me find out what's going on here. Paul, are you there?
Yeah, I am now.
Oh, I don't know what was going on, but something was right. And you wanted me to share that other screen? Was that what you were talking?
But mute the audio on the shared screen and then turn on the share.
Mute it on the
share screen, not me. You don't want to mute me. Just mute the share screen because I can't mute it.
Okay. So
Okay, now bring that share screen on.
okay.
Okay, now we're going to run through this at half speed or quarter speed. One thing I wanted to point out, which is why I paused the video before, but I was muted and I couldn't unmute myself until Restream kind of figured it out what was going on. You've got the plumes up here and you've got plumes down here. So there's a defined line right here as this video steps forward. And what happens is it creates a pressure here and a pressure here and creates a tornadic swirl down here as we go through it.
And it's right around the actually I don't know if that's KLIX or which of the radars it is right now. It's very small on my screen, but it actually blooms around the radar too. So
Yeah.
because the radars can also spiral the energy, it can bloom it out, it could shrink. The bloom can shrink, which is like a release of the heat. So as it releases the heat, there's a vacuum, and we have seen, I call this the wind wave effect, right? Wind waves. The wind waves go over Doppler radar, but they triangulate from 3 different directions over the radar after this release of energy that shrinks the bloom on the screen. And so we've triangulated on it. Now, are they doing this all the time, every day? That was not a hurricane. What we're seeing there is not a hurricane. That's just regular weather. So we believe they are doing this every day. It's easier for me to triangulate on weather in my region because I can look up at the sky, see what's going on, than overlap it. And I want to do more work showing the outside and the radar overlapping to see. So when this happens on the radar, this is what it looks like outside. But when I started figuring this out, then my weather started making sense. And so someone says, is there a solution to this? Yes. First of all, there is no solution if you're not aware of the problem. You're just a victim of the narrative and the agenda. So number 1 is awareness. Okay. Number 2 is spreading that awareness, educating others. And number 3 is getting victims. Same thing with the situation we're in right now. We have children dropping in the schoolyard. We won't say what from. And their parents are scared to get anyone in trouble.
Yeah.
So they,
right.
And it's horrible. So until you have blood on your hands and you want to see the culprit hang, then there won't be any liability. But if you want liability, I'm showing you where to look, because who's operating that? It's joint forces. Okay. It's the Navy, it's the Army, it's the military, but who's actually saying where the Doppler radar needs to, it's all on automatic pilot. Okay. There's absolutely no chain of custody on who's manning the radar. It just randomly, like, how does it know which direction to be pointing? Is it all AI at this point? Well, then it needs to be checked. It needs to be checked because and this is where my work went. So I said, I don't want to be that girl. I don't want to be that girl. And I started to look and capture as many hurricanes from that moment forward as I could. And then going backwards, and I went back to when they started naming hurricanes, and I'm like, that's when the radar technology started rolling out. Were they doing it before then? I said, I got to go back to the beginning of electricity if you can, because if you believe in ancient civilizations, we might have had technology before that we've lost. But in any case, to our civilization, to the beginning, to be right before Tesla. And so I did. And then we could tell you how I found Tesla by studying a list of tornadoes. If you were going to play that again, I'll let you finish that clip for the viewers.
Okay. Well, there's also people out there, there's conjecture out there, and there's videos with supporting evidence and photographs of places around the Earth that lead someone to wonder if there was a civilization, a cataclysmic event that happened like a couple of 100 years ago, and there was kind of like a do-over, because there's signs of advanced technology, even advanced beyond what we have right now. that had
Yes.
been dated back 200-300 years. So there was something that happened. Was it a comet that took out the dinosaurs? Maybe not. But anyway, okay, getting back to this video, if you notice, the plumes up here, they start, and then they hit down here below, and then they hit here. It would create a pressure, and create that swirl. There first, then down there, then there.
And actually,
And it's creating the swirl.
yeah, the swirl goes around a radar, an actual radar, because the radar energy can swirl clockwise,
Mhm.
maybe even counterclockwise, but it can swirl around and grab the energy around there. So you've got the bottom part of that cloud gets ripped off from the top, which gets sent up. And you can see them. They look like little decimated, like little sheep clouds. They look like after microwaves have hit them, they hit them and they break them off. And now here's here's what else this technology does. It allows Australia to be burned to the ground, including the koalas and our beloved little animals that we were horrified to see burn up, because it keeps the rain off of Australia. And we had activists that have followed this work and have done a fabulous job overlapping, the the climate on their continent. Excuse me. And we saw at one point a cloud the shape of Australia in the negative space of Australia was the negative space of the cloud. The cloud was all around Australia, but not coming onto the landfall at one point. I mean,
Wow.
this is what it can do. And so as you're hearing Europe getting tornadoes and you're like, oh, are they coming on board with the Doppler technology, all that standardized stuff? So when did this happen? Did this happen and did it kick off for Katrina? Did it happen before? When you look at the Doppler radar came out in 3 waves. Let's see if I can remember now, because it's been 1957, 1974, and 1988 to 1992. And 92, we had high pressure ridge drought in the Midwest that started. So the getting online, I believe there were experiments. I believe there might have been some force amplification, but the centralization, the standardization of the weaponized daily weather hacking network has kicked up. At different phases, every few years, there's more. And what's the irony of this is that they use extreme weather as a reason. We must work harder to predict these weather events. We need more technologies, more satellites, more and more. And so then there's stuff that they can do with satellites too. I mean, there's all sorts of things. And actually the number one weather controller is the sun and the climate and the cosmos. And there may be ways that we can actually affect the cosmos and the sun weather anyways, because there's a thing that Tesla had discovered, which was called tapping the tit of the sun. Basically, when you throw, and this falls into electric universe theory and all that, it's electrical thing. You throw energy at the sun, it'll send it back to you. And so are we pulsing the sun and having it send stuff back? And then when there's a solar flare, we can predict that there's going to be more weather or more this, because it amplifies things as that energy comes into the Earth's field. I can't prove that. I can tell you that it's very likely. I can tell you that I believe it. I can tell you that the history, the science, the ideas are all there, but I can't prove it. What I can prove that requires and begs answering is why these damn hurricanes keep going into Doppler radar. Now, the last one last year didn't. I can still show you how they're manipulating the hurricane using the radar. When they have the high pressure, the hurricane won't go to any place that has the big blue bloom. That's a high pressure, that'll break it up or cause it to move underneath it or away from it. It will go. So you can have a beam pointed at the hurricane and create a wall. So the hurricane will come right up to it and stay there for days, but it can't go through, but it's being fed, right? You can feed the sides of it through different things. You can do the chemtrails, which create boundary issues, and then you have borders. It's contrails dehydrate technically, unless it's got some other formula, cocktail or whatever. It's a dehydrating thing. So it does help move the fronts in along with the microwaves. The microwaves, it was because chemtrails only explained so much of my weather to me when I was looking at it, and we documented power plants popping off clouds in the distance in Baton Rouge. We had the people in Baton Rouge documenting it. We could see it in a distance from down in New Orleans, and then in the afternoon that rain would come down and rain down on us, and it actually even created floods that we've documented. So that was very relevant to a piece of the puzzle, but I don't think they're employing the power plants all the time. I don't know how they're doing it, and I don't know enough about that, but I do know that the eye of the storms has consistently, for way too many, even if they use the indirect approach from here on out, we have enough evidence standing in the history and in the collection of the data and triangulating in the predictions and the testimonies that we know the Doppler radar is affecting the climate. And we know that it's been weaponized for different agendas. Like, for instance, when they made the passports here in New Orleans mandatory, we wanted to organize and fight against it right away, but we had a hurricane on the anniversary of Katrina that ended up doing so much damage that most of the people we had as allies who were passionate and diehard had to stop and put the roof back on their houses.
Right.
The father of my own child lost his house. The roof was ripped off. So these things are very relevant. And now they're trying to say that climate change is causing heart attacks when we know it really is causing these kids to get heart attacks.
Oh my God.
Yes.
All right.
Maybe because microwaves are causing heart attacks. In that case, I'm willing to believe that, yes, you know what? The climate change is causing heart attacks. In that case, I was willing to believe that. That is the only way that you're going to convince me that climate change is causing heart attacks, when you acknowledge the microwave element. And so pointing at chemtrails, even though I wrote the children's chemtrail book, all right, pointing out chemtrails to me is kind of, it needs to be done. Yes, look at that. It's horrible. It's contrail pollution. That we could be sure of that. It's contrail pollution, and it's probably weaponized, and it does play into the climate changing technologies that we're seeing. But who and what we can't prove. But when you see the storm going into Doppler radar, sweetheart, we got to talk about this. We got to ask you some questions. You're in the position of having to explain why that is all the time. And so I started studying a list of tornadoes, historic tornadoes, to see, okay, hurricanes started in the 50s. They started naming them. Is that when maybe they were playing with it, weaponized weather back before then? They were experimenting on radar in the 40s.
They've been controlling the weather since Vietnam. How do you think we buried those guys in mud between rice paddies?
Well, that's what we found out. I mean, they kept it from Congress for a decade. So people say, oh, well, we would know if we did that. No, we didn't know when we did do it. And we extended the monsoon season and took out the Ho Chi Minh Trail and whatnot with just a couple cloud seeding projects. You can hear Ben Livingston talk about it. Yeah. But is that the first weather modification weaponized, example of weather control that we have here? No, it might have been. Well, no, actually it wasn't, because we had cloud seeding and we had the Texas ranchers, cattle ranchers, suing the weather modification people for stealing their weather. This is the problem with weather. They will never tell you the truth about it because there's liability. When you make it rain here, you stop the rain over there. Someone's not going to like the checks and balances of that. And then you got liability because you're messing with God's business. And so, ironically, I was studying documents. The World Meteorological Organization's reports on weather modification in 2013, and the United States, the NOAA did not report any weather modification projects that year. However, they do say in the same report that weather modification has been going on in some cases for 50 years. Some players have been doing it, like the hydroelectric companies. Now, if you think about it, don't the hydroelectric companies have invested interest in making sure that they stay wet
Oh, absolutely. One
Right.
thing that I wanted to point out, just to validate a statement that you made earlier in the program, and then I'm going to duck out of here because I don't
Sure.
want to um, um, be talking all the time. Uh,
Well, I
if you
appreciate your
watch the
input because you're
video,
right.
okay, I'm going to step through this video again. And to prove your point that the Doppler radars are all interconnected, they're all controlled from a single source, because there is absolutely no way on God's green earth that a Doppler wave could start at the East Coast and work its way across the country and go to the West. Watch this. Here it comes. And then it fades out in the east, and the fade goes to the west.
hmm
There is no way on God's green earth that that could happen unless all of those radars are interconnected and controlled from a central source for a
Very,
reason.
very smart input. Yes, amongst
Yeah.
yeah, add
Yeah.
that to the list. And that's not a meteorological event, right? I mean, that the weather doesn't come from the east to the west. What was that about? Why it should have, if anything should have changed, it should have maybe gone from the west to the east. So that's another valid point. That's absolutely essential.
Those are the plumes
In
created by the Doppler.
yeah.
Those are the
And so
little,
we have even more. That's just the tip of the iceberg, really. So when I
just the tip.
started studying the tornado list, and this is when I said, "Oh my God, I'm going to have to go back to the beginning of electricity." When I found this, there was one. I like things to make sense, but I'm okay with not understanding things at first. And this is what gives me the audacity. I don't need to know what's going on. To like, do you need to know that your husband is cheating on you to know he's cheating on you? Do you have to catch him in the act to feel like something ain't right? No, you
No.
don't. So so anyway, I let my intuition guide me, and then I flesh out the science around the facts that I have found. Okay, and that's how I work. And then I when there's a gatekeeper, I go through the gate that he doesn't want me to go through. I mean, that's how I work. But so I one tornado was striking. It was a 1917 Mattoon tornado, and it was an unremarkably straight line, and it was the largest tornado at the time that was recorded. It was 3 states. And we just had one not too long ago that was 5 states. Okay, keep that in mind too. But,
Yeah.
and I said, "Well,
In a
what was
straight
Nikola
line
Tesla
with a
do?"
gentle arc.
That's what I was
It
trying
was
to bring up earlier. Yes.
Yeah, it was 5 states in a straight line with a gentle arc, that lined up on the Gulf of Mexico.
Absolutely unbelievable. I
And
mean,
I didn't have a computer at the time, so I wasn't even able to study that one, but I was just like rolled my eyes because I was recovering from Ida as well and all that, or it was around that time anyway. But so what was Nikola Tesla doing in 1917? Well, turns out the Wardenclyffe Tower that was his was shut down that year. I said, "Well, isn't that interesting?" Well, was it shut down before or after the tornado? Well, it was shut down a month and a few days after. Well, that's interesting.
The official
Well,
narrative on that is they pulled his funding because they found out he was gonna give away free electricity.
yeah, J.
um,
Morgan.
actually, the official narrative on that, yeah, I mean that's what we know. They pulled the funding, but that they pulled the funding years ago. Years ago, it was laying dormant supposedly for years. They shut it down because, according to the papers at the time, um, there were some German spies hanging around. Why would German spies be interested in a dead facility that's been dormant for 10 years? Well, so what it was, what do we say? Well, where was the Wardenclyffe Tower? Where was the Wardenclyffe Tower on the map? Like, let's say the screen is the United States, right? The Wardenclyffe Tower was right over here on the East Coast, right?
Northeast, yeah.
And where was that line? That remarkably straight line. Sorry, pointing straight with a little curve at the end, right to the Wardenclyffe Tower. That's a triangulation. You have 1 point, and the straight line is 2 points, right? Because it's on a triangulation, but it happens to be pointing that way, and it was pointing to my Wardenclyffe Tower. Sorry if my arrows aren't lining up, but it was like I felt led in this work. I'm not that smart. I'm just really curious. I was trying to say, well, if this is the truth, then it had to have started somewhere. And I'm like, the first weather experiment. And now there's the Tunguska event as well. That was another thing. Well, I just went back to Nikola Tesla and I started from scratch. I started actually and in the world of hot water documentary series, an episode 4 or 5, I actually turned them into a movie, which condenses it. And then I've had little snippets that like condenses it even more, just telling the Nikola Tesla story. Because Nikola Tesla made fog so thick in 1899 or 1901, right before the Wardenclyffe at the Colorado Springs lab, that he couldn't see his hand in front of him. And everything he wrote, he understood that the weather is nothing more than just electrical impulses and energy exchanges, and that when man realizes how to manipulate these checks and balances of electrical exchanges, it'll be no thing to irrigate arid deserts in distant lands. And so all we're seeing now, all I'm saying is we have arrived at 100 years of perfecting Nikola Tesla's technology. The further in I went, the more I understood everything about where we are at today. It overlaps like a shoe print on history. It makes sense now that the only meteorologist who used to predict, now I'm going to draw a blank on his name. There's a lot of episodes I haven't had the time to make yet because I'm the researcher, I'm the filmmaker. I'm also challenged my city hall when I realized what microwaves were doing to weather. And when I realized that the cell tower a block away from me was killing me, I went and I challenged City Hall to give me a single study to prove that 5 A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J was safe for humanity. And I would not, they were not able to do that after promising us a health panel, which was a sham. And, we won't know that Wuhan won the race to 5G a month before making the flu, the JJ mandatory.
Right.
Yes.
But
and the safety is still subject to debate.
Yes. Well, it's been settled as far as I'm concerned, unless you're ignoring science. But yeah,
they supposedly fixed it or made it safe. So I
don't believe that. I believe that's opium, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm susceptible to it, and ever since they turned it on, we have a whole host of complaints. And you know what? The city's not even responsible. They don't even know if it's turned on. If you ask the city, because they're just leasing this thing out to people, and people can just play with whatever frequencies they want. It's not being monitored. I mean, there should be an interactive map that shows you which towers are on when broadcasting what. I mean, that's the least it could do. And definitely there is the burden of turning the technology into a safe device for public consumption. It should be on the manufacturers, right? There are ways to send the signal out without as much radiation. There's ways that the industry could be forced to be burdened to protect the people. I mean, I don't know. There's got to be limits to it because it's radiative technology. I mean, and the technology, scientists say it does heat the air very, very little. So I said, good luck fighting global warming with a false narrative where you're installing a blanket of cellular microwave towers to help fight global warming when water vapor is the most prominent greenhouse gas on Earth. So you see the whole thing of obscuring the significance of water vapor in the climate change narrative, or dismissing it because there's no anthropogenic effect. Well, we don't have any industries what are all these landscapes of radar is what I'm saying. And that's all I'm really saying. I'm just telling you basic science. Water vapor is affected by microwaves. Microwaves are in our midst. We have over a decade of hurricanes going into the Doppler radar. And I don't know how much further back because the radars were kind of crude and the technology's gotten better, but now the best way is to catch a hurricane during the storm. Now you may look at a hurricane and say, well, that didn't go right into the radar. Since I've been pulling out that narrative, I see that they're doing it in different ways as well, but I know how they're doing it. They can pulse it over here. They can make a wall there. Usually you can see that there'll be a valley, like they'll bloom, and it's weather on demand. So it's within, you can see their intention a few, 12 hours or 24 hours ahead of time, not much more than that. But as a hurricane starts getting into the shore, then you can see, oh, it looks like they're blocking the east. It looks like, they're going to bring it in more towards the west, or they're feeding it, so you can, they were lazy long enough for us to decipher some of the other stuff. And now we know how they're pulling and dragging it, how they're clicking and dragging, cutting and pasting the weather.
Exactly. I tracked Hurricane Sandy for 10 days prior to it hitting landfall and wiping out New York and New Jersey. They spun it up in the Gulf or in the Caribbean. They steered it north. They pushed it up the eastern seaboard. They kept the pressure on it to keep it from hitting landfall too soon. And once it got at a right angle to New Jersey, they made a left hook and steered it right into the New York Islands. And
so I revisited Sandy and saw
there.
the Doppler radars that were involved with that. If you really wanted to get liability, you would have to go back and ask them for the product, the Doppler product, and you would have to have the task of, and they would just give you these images, and it would be your task to reanimate it. So it's easier to capture this stuff in real time if you're trying to join, because it and look, some people are like, oh, I'm so glad that girl's on it, and I'm not on it. I'm just telling people how we all need to be on it, and we need to start overlapping our local weather.
Yes, this brings up something. Okay, go say what you're going to say, and then I'd like to say something.
It would just it would be wonderful if people can start studying their local radar and their local weather, and learn and seeing when the radar does this, we have high pressure. When the radar does this, we have low pressure. It might take you a while to know what you're looking at, but because it is linked, if you have intellectual honesty and you're trying to understand it, you will start to have aha moments, and then it'll be more real than me just taking capture of it's very real. It's very real. People can see it. It's just twirling around the radar for an hour, for hours, and not moving too. We have a lot of things. We have newspapers and meteorological organizations that have acknowledged, oh, it's right over the radar. Well, it does that a lot. Why are you just commenting on it now? And now there's a lot of gatekeeping too.
What I was saying was I tracked it 10 years ago when it was happening. I was monitoring the HARP activity, and I was monitoring the radar activity from the Dopplers 10 years ago. I watched them do it.
Yes.
This is not something that I looked up after the fact. Hurricane Katrina told me something funny was going on.
Right.
Hurricane Sandy, I watched them set it up. I know it was on purpose. So anyways, next subject.
Well, and you're a witness. It's really, it's the emperor wears no clothes. Once you see this, you're like, holy just right here in our backyard. And so the thing I challenge anyone.
Speaking of your backyard, I would like to bring something up because it's very relevant, because as far as our backyard is concerned, there are ways that people need to get involved. It was interesting that we're doing this today, and I just got this email today, and it says, if you don't want a 5G, and I hope you know what I mean, a small cell tower in your front yard, your action is needed now. Just like state law has wrecked communities with Airbnb, state 5G streamlining law, HB 2365, strips local power over cell antennas in public rights of way. Now is your chance to change this. Representative Pamela Powers Hanley has sponsored a bill that would require 80% of homeowners within a half a mile of a proposed tower to approve its installation. The
Yes.
the bill is called Cinco Geo Choice, and I'm using that word
Right.
for a reason. Okay, and just got a number, HB 2795. So that's just an example of keeping on top of what's going on in your own community, because can you imagine being that close to these?
Well, that's the whole point, is they're going to have to be on every block. It's like getting a cell tower everywhere. And then
Yeah.
they may not rush it in the beginning because they're trying to get people acclimated. So once the period of time for resisting this is closed, then they're going to come out and they're going to wreck the landscape even further.
Yeah.
And
But
look,
this is
it's
the kind of things that people haven't paid attention to in the past, and then it continues, it goes through, and boom, we end up with, and
there's
this
the few
I'm
because
sorry.
some people think it's 5 gigahertz. It's not. That's the generation. The G is for generation.
Yeah.
So
So
people will say, "Oh, well, I already have the gigahertz thing on my phone, and I'm okay." It's a range of frequency. So you might be okay at this range. And look, I was okay the first 4 years, 3.5 years I lived by a cell tower. It was after the 4th year that I was starting to having heart problems. I couldn't keep up with my toddler, even though I was fit enough to have a 2-year-old. I couldn't run after him. It was affecting my breathing, and the fluoride was coming in with it, and I basically had to move from the neighborhood. And I started drinking electron transport water that helps balance and adds negative electrons to the cell, balancing the positive electrons, and thus hydrating it through the water. But anyway,
yes. What
one
times
of the
one?
little tricks that we have to fight to stay alive in the middle of our roasting. So it doesn't have to be straight up like, going to kill you dead. I'm sure there's a range in that frequency that can. It's frequency, but we don't know what frequency, and neither does the city. They just but they vote on it, and they ignore the people's concerns about the public health issues.
And they frequently take bribes on it as well, but that's a little thing that
That's a whole other thing, right? I wish I would have known about the bonds and affidavit movement, which is kind of getting popular right now. Back in the day,
we're gonna have more shows on that in the near future, because that's a really important. We talked about that a little bit, and Paul brought up the bonds for the win. Isn't that what it was?
Yes.
Yeah, bonds for the win. Yeah.
So I'm not sure how much I can talk about this for forever. I don't know if there's any questions or any if you want some more, but essentially that's it. So how do we? This very complicated things. Doppler radar steers the storms. All right. That is what the gatekeepers are not capable of saying. One guy out there who will remain nameless, but he's one of the big shots in the chemtrail community. I've personally had him try to gatekeep me and keep me on CO2 before, but then he says a microwave facility tower at Eglin Air Force Base is controlling the storm, and he'll show the radar, but he doesn't say radar, and he definitely doesn't say Doppler. So can you say Doppler radar steers the storms? He had to concede the image because that was out there. Somebody must have come back and shown him that. So he decided to mystify it. Language matters, nuance matters. So he says, what can you do about some foreign technology that's on a military base? Nothing. But if you understood that it's Doppler radar that your local meteorologist is riding every night to tell you, yeehaw, yeah, here's what the weather's going to do, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, here's what Doppler radar is going to do to the weather is more like it, right? If you realize that, how much more liability, how much more brazen, how much more pissed off are you going to be than something the government's doing on that military base? Yes, some of these are on a military base and they're operated by the military, yes. But it's the Doppler radar. Let's not mystify it any more than it is. It's amazing. I've had people that worked on repairing the radar and people that have built the radomes that didn't know it did that. But after I had shown what I'd shown, what my work shows, were fully on board with it. They didn't doubt it at all, and they worked on the radar. So it's just a small little application to change the function according to the patents. I mean, I don't know, but you tell me why your storms kept going into the Doppler radar. And we're not talking about ping-ponging or like it would go straight. Like people say, so they try to say at the American Meteorological Society conference, well, there's a lot of Doppler radars, and they probably put in places where the storms come in. I'm like, there's a lot of holes on a pool table, but it doesn't mean that when I break my table with my shot, that I'm going to get any of those balls into the hole. And yet what we're seeing is that my break shot is getting all of the things into the hole, right? All of the balls get into the hole. How can that be? And directly. It's not like it ends up there eventually. It goes into it. So even if they're using an indirect approach now, we have enough that has clued us, that has shown us, and we've triangulated on some of the things, the cause and effects of the radar. And it is my work, my intention to extend this work. I wish I could create the next series of the next season in the World of Hot Water documentary. But right now, this work is so suppressed. If all I can do is just keep sharing what I've done until it becomes at least viral in the chemtrail conspiracy media, the medium at least. Not just chemtrails, but in all of it. This is the globalist conspiracy. This is not a theory. This is theory nailed down. This is the tail pinned on the donkey. This is the emperor wears no clothes and he's naked and he's doing some nasty things in front of everybody, to everybody. So we need to first of all realize what we're looking at. Second of all, educate others, and third of all, go for liability. I've gotten in trouble for exposing this work. I've had government contractors, police sent to my house, followed from my son's school, things that I'm not going to waste y'all's time trying to convince you of. I'm satisfied to that end.
Thank you for being a warrior, Nola. Thank you for being a warrior.
I'm just really stubborn and I mean, I'm not a whistleblower, although I've captured the testimony of whistleblowers. I'm just looking at the science and saying, let's not get so over confused with jargon and rhetoric that is weaponized narrative and linguistics that designed, and let's just look at microwaves affect water vapor. Water vapor is the most prominent greenhouse gas on Earth. Let's get the conversation right. First of all, let's get our science right. Okay. Let's challenge these. I challenge any master climate scientist, climate change expert to answer to my simple scientific facts. You can wave your degree in front of me, but it's toilet paper if you can't acknowledge water vapor and microwaves. I mean, it not to be vulgar, but it is that simple. And contrails are chemtrails. Chemtrails are contrails. Let's start holding them accountable to contrail pollution, right? When you think about it, we're 80% water and we're electrical beings.
Are horrible. Those metals are horrible to get into our brain and our bodies. They're hard to get rid of. And
metals
affect.
And they ionize with the EMF. They get ionized and they melt. I've had it where I was in an area that was emitting. That we know that around the maps show that they've activated it. And being out by the pollution and my skin became really, really rough. And like it had goosebumps that were baked on. And I guess I had some things ionized into my skin. I had to detox. Now I'm soft again. But it was really rough after I was out there in the area of transmission in the city where, you got biofuels that are glyphosate and who knows what other aerosols. Aerosols matter, and people think aerosols, like hairsprays in the 80s. Didn't we do away with the hairsprays? Like, oh my God, we think that aerosols is something that house moms do, but we ignore industry's aerosols, but we're going to focus on CO2. I mean, it is such a joke how industry has us acting like 3-year-olds who don't know basic science.
Yeah. It's
hilarious.
They always want
It's hilarious that they outlawed fluorocarbons in hairsprays to save the ionosphere, and now they're baking it with HARP and with Doppler radars.
Well, that's
They're
different.
they're,
That's
they're
different.
actually burning holes in it. It's like a hairspray can the size of the Statue of Liberty. Okay,
Exactly.
give me a break.
Yeah, was it you, Nola, or you, Paul? I don't remember. I think it was you that about the catalytic converters and what that did to the fuel, making it nano-sized. Who told me that?
With the car fuel?
Yeah, the car fuel. You know how
Right.
we have
So I mean,
catalytic converters in order to
right. They don't mind us pointing at the sky, but what they don't want us to realize too is like, those car. Remember that pollution in the 80s? Car pollution was so bad, then it just went away. What happened? Well, it didn't go away. They say, well, it's a catalytic converter, right? Pulverizes the pollution, but it turns it into nanoparticulates. And so what we need to do is we need to test for ultrafine particles. We may not be able to stop Goliath, but we can create checkpoints where Goliath has to check in his sword and his this and that, and has to answer to the public. And so we need to pitch a fit about contrail pollution and the albedo modification that the jet cirrus forms. And we need to test for ultrafine particles. And we need to say, okay, so here's the cincher. Why is this discovery so important? Besides, I mean, they're weaponizing weather with radar, for crying out loud. Why is it so essential? It's because chemtrails and geoengineering is a dead end. When we were going to the American Meteorological Society conference originally before our discovery, we were interviewing the meteorologists and asking them what they thought about geoengineering, because that wasn't a conspiracy theory. He's like, oh, that would be horrible for the environment. We don't even know what all it would do, but it might be necessary if things get bad enough with global warming. And so now when you point out a chemtrail, you get someone that's well versed in some stuff say, oh, that's geoengineering. That's because global warming is so bad. Well, tell me.
It's solar shielding.
But what does bringing a hurricane into a Doppler radar have to do with fighting global warming?
Yeah.
Nothing. It destroys the global warming narrative. It holds it accountable. It demystifies the whole thing that this weather is about. The weather applications are about saving us. It is not about saving us unless they're stopping every hurricane that's coming.
You know what else? It's not saving us either. It's like you can't believe anything they say.
No, you can't. You can
No.
take what they say, you can turn it upside down, and then you get the truth.
Well,
The thing is, the chemtrails are spraying metals into the sky that the radio waves are reacting to. Those metal particulates are heating the water vapors. The water vapors are causing movements in the ionosphere, causing it to raise and lower, creating high pressure and low pressure.
Yeah,
And the whole thing is under the guise of climate change, which is nothing but a BS narrative, because if they were really concerned about climate change, they wouldn't be killing the inventors that come up with the over unity power systems. They wouldn't be killing the guy that invented the car that would go from New York to Los Angeles on 7 liters of water. They wouldn't be wiping out all of the herbalists and the naturopathic doctors that are healing people, making the toxic pharmaceuticals unnecessary, which are mostly petroleum based. We could leave Gaia's blood in her and
Yes.
live happily on the surface if they
Well,
really
and
care.
the FDA used to be the Bureau of Chemistry, and I like to say that they still are.
Oh, that's funny. That's hilarious.
And they had to hijack the medical schools. They had to, because they had to teach the doctors not to recognize the diseases they were creating.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And actually,
right.
I'm going to finish with this. Catherine Austin Fitz says it, that there's a little trick industry uses where they'll put out a poison, back there used to be DDT back in the days of POLOI or that disease. DDT, lead arsenic. And there's a great book called Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg about the history of the electromagnification of the earth, like of electricity on the earth. As the different amplifications rose up in human history, so did disease. And it's not just a vacuum, but electrosmog disease and all that. We can. There's been different waves that humanity has had to kind of adapt to it. So that they would bring a poison, a toxin into the environment, whether it's electrosmog or a chemical, a pesticide. That's another element of our problems. And in fact, if you really care about CO2, there's scientists that have bought up land that Monsanto can't use anymore. And they did soil transplant, microbe transplant in the soil. And they found that after only 2 years, the CO2 levels went back to normal when they replaced. And you think, our gut is just like the soil. Our gut is the soil is the gut of the earth.
Yeah.
And so when you're destroying that, you're destroying the gut. Same as in the gut, you're going to be sick. Same as on the earth, you're going to have the CO2 out of balance because it's different bacteria that's in the soil than what needs to be. So there's a lot of elements. We don't live in a vacuum. It's not as simple as carbon tax credits. That's got nothing to do with it. That's just a cashing in racket. And then the control racket, So so she says that they'll put out a toxin, Catherine Austin Fitts again, and then they'll introduce a vajayjay right at the time that they remove the toxin, and they can give the credit to the vajayjay. So this trick has run its course. Humanity is rising. Consciousness is rising.
Yeah, finally.
And their little tricks are not going to keep on working.
No.
We're going to end. The cycle stops here.
Keep people apart so they couldn't talk and they couldn't discuss any of this stuff.
Exactly.
Right.
And
and
stop us from singing too, which is part of the frequency magic that we have, the prayers and all of that. It all matters. It's a spiritual battle being fought in the material realm and energy, frequency, and vibration. It's all energy, frequency, and vibration. So we can turn this around. And
good will always win.
Yes.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago, I was living in a place and the trees were all dying in the area. And one of them fell over and pulled the roots out. And I was able to dig out around the stump. And what I found was that the roots were impacted with aluminum particulates. And so the chemtrails that were being rained down on the property, that aluminum was leaching into the roots and plugging them up so the tree could no longer drink. It could no longer feed. And it died and it fell over. That's what this is.
It's a lot of aluminum.
Something else that makes you wonder, is there been a number of people who have reported on being on beaches and finding this black magnetic substance? How did it get there?
Yeah. Yeah.
2 guesses, 3 guesses, and the first 2 don't count.
But unfortunately, you won't ever know. There's no liability. You have to think liability because proving that something happened isn't the same thing as proving who did it.
Exactly.
So, with the Doppler radar, there's liability. That's why the significance of that.
Yeah, and
or there can be.
Regarding this thing too, it's total immunity is the problem. If that was taken away, everything would stop.
Everything.
Yeah.
In a heartbeat.
Oh yeah.
Because now they get to operate freely without any liability. They have immunity. Anyway, on that
agree with that immunity was done through fraud and coercion and lies and bamboozling the public. So it has no authority in God's creation,
exactly.
Creator's creation. Anyway,
exactly.
That's what I'll say.
Exactly. I can't thank you enough Nola, for
Thank
the
you.
information that you have shared. And maybe in the future, we might think about doing another show, because I don't know if the people, listeners, know it, but I'm very proud of you for the fact that you have served notice to a public official.
Yes.
And that's pretty awesome, because
That's
we
huge.
need to see more and more and more of that.
Yes, I think that people are realizing that we got to think outside of the box, and actually, it's the box that was provided for us in the Constitution, and we have tools available to us regarding, pulling bonds and oaths of offices, and
It's a peaceful way to go.
yeah, the
Peaceful.
pen is truly mightier than the sword, so we have to show up and outsmart them, or yeah, beat them at their own game.
Exactly. Did you have anything to say, Paul?
No, actually, it's other than thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this, because I had a great time and there was lots of great information and it was just a whole lot of fun.
Thank you for being a witness.
Yeah, and we really appreciate the information that you provided, because you had a pretty good handle of knowledge on this weather thing. So that was a nice
Absolutely.
addition. That was a nice
Okay.
addition. Thank you for that. So anyway,
You're welcome.
everyone
So,
there, thank
Thanks
you
for
for
your
listening.
Yeah, there's some great. I got some things. I didn't know that Russia sold us Alaska. I'm reading the comments here, so thanks to the people who are commenting.
Yeah, we have a good group that follows many times.
they are
Anyway,
way above average.
way above average. Yes, they're way above average. So anyway, thank you, and I think we'll call this a wrap. And we'll
Yes.
see you again. Thank you again.
Thank you so
Ciao,
much.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Ciao.
We'll stand. We'll stand. We will stand. Standing tall and standing strong, defiant and looking on. No way down from our past we climb. We'll push on while there's good life. Watch our backs through the night. Don't look down. Yeah, we'll take
Together we will say, I'm going to end